So this detachment may well be the best of the bunch so far, and it's honestly kind of hard to see much being better than it. It is just so good and so strong. It brings a huge set of bonuses and buffs to basically all of your units, not just a specific set like some of the other detachments have. And on top of that, it also has a really strong suite of enhancements and stratagems to make use of. So I think whilst the other Necron detachments aren't exactly bad, there are still very good ones like the Hypercrypt Legion. They are still very usable. I do honestly see this one being quite popular going forward in competitive settings. The Necron Starshatter arsenal brings along two very useful buffs to your army. One is completely army-wide with a slight hoop to jump through, and the other one is on your non-Titanic vehicles and mounted units. Now, the main rule of Relentless Onslaught is that all Necron units get +1 to hit when they attack an enemy in range of an objective. So straight away, that is incredible. It's not going to mean you always get +1 to hit, but as a lot of the game, and certainly a lot of the more important critical aspects of the game are going to be set around and focused around the objectives, this gives you a massive advantage in those situations. Whether you are shooting at an enemy unit holding a backfield objective, whether you are trying to clear off an enemy unit on a faraway one on the other end of the board, or you are just fighting over a critical one in the midfield, whether you are at ranged or in melee, this is going to make it much easier for you to win that particular engagement. And moving things like warriors from their 4s to hit to now hitting on 3s is a whopping buff to their firepower, whilst things like your Locust Destroyers, they are now going to be hitting on 2s with their Gorse Cannons and rerolling hit rolls of 1 against the nearest enemy target, so they are just going to be blisteringly accurate. It is arguably one of the most consistent, not to mention easy to achieve detachment buffs that we've seen throughout all of 10th edition, and I think it is just going to be so useful for your ranged output, your melee output, and playing the objective game much more aggressively. But that isn't everything, because the second part of the detachment rule is, as mentioned on your non-Titanic vehicles and mounted units, they gain the assault rule on their ranged weapons. So not only are all of your units much more accurate now, but a huge swathe of your stuff, your Doomsday Arcs, your Triarch Stalkers, to your Locust Destroyers, they are now basically an extra d6 inches faster than they were before. And this is so good for getting you that board control much more easily. And then with that bonus to hit, you really can be super aggressive to just kick the enemy off their objectives and get up and onto them much quicker. So all in all, it's just a very well-rounded detachment rule that really does let you play with almost any of your units effectively, which again, I really like. I like that you can bring pretty much any unit in the codex and it will get some benefit from this. It just generally makes you better in every way that is important to the game, with the exception of durability. Your output is better, your mobility is better, your objective game is better. It is just a great rule. And then the enhancements help to boost that even more. You have got 4 absolute bangers here. And starting off, we have Dread Majesty. This is 30 points, but it gives the bearer, who has to be an Overlord or a Catacomb command barge, an aura where friendly Necron units, except Titanic, within 6 inches of them, get to reroll hit and wound rolls of 1. Which is just bonkers good. To go back to those Necron warriors, they can now be +1 to hit and rerolling hit roll and wound rolls of 1, and that does actually make them quite a terrifying prospect, and it just gets even better as you get into your better units. Things like Immortals, Praetorians, Destroyers, even vehicles are going to benefit from this, and I think the fact it is an aura and not just on the bearer's unit is mind-blowingly good, and it makes this a really easy auto pick in my opinion. And the hits keep on coming with the miniaturized Nebula Scope, which is up next. This is a mere 15 points, and it grants the bearer and his unit ignores cover. It's maybe not the most exciting buff in the world, but it's very cheap for what it does, and with the amount of cover in 10th edition, being able to help push through the most from your weapons, a lot of which are quite often -1 AP, so that ignores cover bonus will be felt, and even things like Marines are going to have to sit up and take notice when they've got ignores cover -1 AP shot coming from 20 warriors with Gorse Reapers that have rocked up next to them. It really is quite an impactful buff on a lot of your shooting. Demanding Leader is probably the least exciting of the enhancements, I think, but it is also a very, very cheap 10 points, and it can definitely help you out in a pinch. It lets you pick a vehicle or mounted unit within 6 inches of the bearer in your movement phase, and they can fall back and still shoot. So it can be absolutely brutal if something like a Stalker or some Tomb Blades are tied up. It's going to make your opponent trying to keep things locked down much more difficult. So again, it's maybe not the most exciting, I will admit that, but if you know your opponent has a load of cheap chaff style units that they are going to use to try and tie up your big guns, this could be absolutely invaluable to your game plan. Finally, we have the Chrono Impedance Fields. This is again relatively pricey at 25 points, but again, it's worth it because it's very strong. You pick a vehicle or mounted unit that isn't Titanic and that's within 6 inches of the bearer in your command phase, and they just get a flat out -1 to incoming damage until your next command phase. So yeah, that is pretty insane. Keeping your Tomb Blades safe from 2 damage shooting, or making things like your Locust Destroyers much more durable with their 3 wounds, that -1 to incoming damage has a big impact on that. And it can even, as it stands right now, help you keep the Silent King alive for longer because he is a vehicle and he is not Titanic. So he can very much essentially at the moment be a 26 wound, 2 up save, 4 up invuln terror that also reduces damage by 1. So it is a really good buff, and I personally, with this detachment, would immediately keep a spare 70 points aside just to bring this Dread Majesty and the miniaturized Nebula Scope in pretty much every list while I was building it. But worry not, because things don't even stop there. Not only is the Detachment rule and the Enhancements a brilliant set of bonuses, but the Stratagems are also pretty much all absolutely fire. We start with Merciless Reclamation, and just worth mentioning here, all of these are a nice cheap 1 command point, but this is in your shooting or your fight phase. You pick a unit, excluding Titanic, and for the phase, if the target is within range of an objective marker, you get +1 to wound. So hello, +1 to hit, +1 to wound, re-rolling hit and wound rolls of 1 on a unit of Necron warriors. And just for a bit of reference with this combo, 20 warriors with Gorse Reapers will net you around 11 damage into Custodian Guard, so killing off 3 of them and very nearly killing a 4th. It's very likely that whatever character you have with the warriors will probably do that wound to kill the 4th, so it's a very powerful strat and can make a unit like that just unbelievably good at shooting things off of objectives. Dimensional Tunnel is next. This is in your movement phase. You pick a non-Titanic vehicle or mounted unit and they can move through terrain and models. So like we saw with the Dark Angels detachment, this is potentially a very good offensive and defensive bonus, I think. It lets you keep stuff safe and back and out of line of sight until you need them, and then you can just burst them through terrain and unleash a load of firepower and shooting into your opponent. It's really great on things like a Doomsday Arc that will be target priority number 1 for your opponent, or, dare I say it, the Silent King for just doing an unexpected whirlwind slam into your opponent straight through a terrain piece. Unyielding Forms is next. This is in your opponent's shooting or fight phase, and again goes on a non-Titanic vehicle or mounted unit. You get the semi-transhuman rule of -1 to wound rolls if the enemy's attack is higher strength than your toughness, so it's great for keeping your vehicles alive against things like las cannons and that sort of thing, but equally it's great on your Locust Destroyers, especially if they've got the Chrono Impedance fields from above, from a nearby character, to make them -1 to be wounded, but also -1 to that incoming damage. So some weapons are going to be absolutely crippled by that combination of debuffs. Endless Servitude lets you pick any Necron non-Titanic unit again, and at the end of the fight phase, it can activate its reanimation if it's in range of an objective. So getting a few models back on a unit like some warriors, or just healing a few wounds back on a vehicle or something, it can be useful and it can make things difficult to put down. It is just a nice, straightforward, not super exciting, but quite useful strat to have if you do need to get a few models back up, or on something like a Catan, it can make them incredibly durable and incredibly difficult to put down for your opponent thanks to their halving damage on top of that. Chrono Shift moves back to a non-Titanic vehicle or mounted unit. In your movement phase, you can just add 6 inches to your movement if you advance instead of rolling. It's again maybe not the most exciting stratagem, but it is rather good, and especially in this detachment, it can be really, really good because of course those vehicles and mounted units have got the assault rule, so you can make the absolute most out of it to get your vehicles and mounted units exactly where you need them, either onto an objective or just out of cover where they were hiding or into firing range, and then still unleash all of their shooting into the opponent. So it's maybe a bit understated, but in this detachment it's really, really useful. The last stratagem is Reactive Reposition. This is in your opponent's shooting phase. Just after a unit has shot, you pick a non-Titanic Necrons unit that was the target of those attacks, and it can just move d6 inches or a flat 6 inches if it's a vehicle or mounted unit. This isn't at the end of the phase, it's straight after something has shot. So this is incredibly good at keeping some of your units safe. If you get shot by a big gun and have a couple of wounds left and you know there are a few other enemy units that are going to be shooting at you, you can use this and just nope your vehicle out of range or out of line of sight and just keep them completely safe from any follow-up shooting that was going to try and finish you off. It is again a strat that can be super defensive but also super offensive, because you could also use this to push a unit up to get onto an objective or screen another unit, or just set yourself up for an easier charge next turn. There are some really, really good uses for this depending on how you want to use it, and it does make, if nothing else, your units very tricky to deal with and pin down. So I can see this being used a lot to either keep a unit alive or just force even more pressure onto an enemy as soon as possible. All in all, I have to say this is almost a perfect detachment, I think. It's got a load of utility for making you hit harder, let you claim objectives more easily, let you move around faster, and it's got some brilliant enhancements and stratagems to help you do all of that even more efficiently, but also add some more durability to your army. It is just fun, it's powerful, and it really does let you play almost anything in the Necrons roster and still feel like you are getting a solid bonus to them as part of this detachment for your game plan. So I really, really do like this detachment. I think it is brilliant. But as always, what do you think of this detachment? And is it going to be the go-to one for Necrons for tournaments going forward? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.